They didn't write about kings. They wrote about the weavers who fed the army, the mothers who taught math while cooking, the boys who repaired water pots, the girls who healed goats. And in each story, a name echoed quietly: Tafari. He was no longer a man. He had become a seed planted in every home. In the heart of pre-colonial Africa, where empires rose and fell under the gaze of wise ancestors, there was a small village called Kumado, hidden between golden hills and rivers that sang songs of the old world. It was in this land, proud and ancient, that a boy was born who refused to kneel before injustice. They mocked him, threatened him, even cursed him. But one day, the same people called him king. This is the story of Tafari, the boy who refused to bow and became a ruler. Tafari was no ordinary boy. From the moment he could speak, he asked questions that made elders shift uncomfortably. Why must the poor pay tribute to the rich? Why are women not allowed in the council? Why must I bow to a man who beats his people? The village head, Chief Adu, always wore a majestic white headcloth, a symbol of power and purity. Tafari, however, never bowed to him. He greeted with respect, but never dropped his head. People whispered, "That boy has no manners." But his mother, Naya, smiled. "He is born to stand tall." By age 12, Tafari had memorized the stories of all 5 neighboring clans. He sat under the trees with elders, learning about wars, famines, and betrayals. But he asked, "Why do we glorify conquerors and forget healers?" One day, he stood during storytelling and declared, "One day, our kingdom will remember the wise more than the warriors." A hush fell. The village priest, Baba Tunji, stood slowly. His white cloth head wrap shimmered in the firelight. "You speak like a king, but you have no crown," he said. "Be careful." When Tafari turned 15, all boys of age were taken before the chief to pledge loyalty. Each one kneeled, kissed the ground, and received a blessing. Tafari stepped forward. "Bow before your king," the chief growled. Tafari looked him in the eye. "I will serve with honor, but I bow only to truth." There was silence, then chaos. "Arrest him," barked the chief. But his mother stepped forward, wrapped in royal blue and gold. "You fear a boy's courage because you lost your own," she said. She was whipped. Tafari was banished. Banished, Tafari entered the forest of forgotten men, where rebels, thinkers, and exiled warriors lived. Among them were blacksmiths, midwives, and former advisors who had once dared to speak the truth. There, he learned not just to read old scrolls and speak 6 dialects, but to listen to women, to farmers, to the silence of the trees. One elder, Makonnen, who once wore the white headcloth of royal scribes, trained him in the law and ancient leadership codes. "You must be the king they never trained," he said. Years passed. Kumado suffered under Chief Adu's rule: famine, rebellion, and the selling of land to foreign traders. People remembered the boy who once refused to kneel. Whispers turned into songs. Then came the fire, literally. A rebellion began. Villagers rose, and in the chaos, the chief fled. The elders gathered. "We need a leader," said Baba Tunji, now gray-bearded but still dignified, his white head wrap soaked with sweat. One voice rose, "Call Tafari." Tafari returned not with soldiers, but with scholars, farmers, and weavers. He brought seeds, ideas, and scrolls. He refused the title king until every clan agreed by voice. When he was crowned, he wore not a golden crown, but a simple band made from the bark of the knowledge tree, and on his head the cloth, white and pure, wrapped by his mentor Makonnen, symbolizing wisdom. He changed laws. He built schools. Women sat in council. Farmers advised trade. He never forgot what it meant to stand when others bowed. As king, Tafari was not known for war, but for words. He walked barefoot through villages to listen. He taught children in the fields. He told them, "A true king kneels only to truth and lifts others to stand." His palace had no thrones, only long benches where all could sit. He died at 83, not in a bed of silk, but beneath a tree with children reading around him. They buried him with a book in one hand and his white headcloth in the other. The kingdom of Kumato had never known a king like Tafari, and now they would never again. He passed beneath the tree of memory, no crown, no gold, only a book in one hand and his white cloth in the other. He was buried with songs, not drums. For 7 days, the kingdom mourned. People from 7 clans walked barefoot to lay down books, clay pots, and carvings at his grave. But by the 8th day, the sky changed. The council of elders gathered in the royal court. The wooden stool where Tafari once sat remained empty. No one dared place their body where his had ruled. But kingdoms cannot run on silence forever. They needed a leader. Tafari left no heir. He had no sons, no declared daughter, no wife who wore the cloth. Some said he wanted the people themselves to choose, but people disagreed. Chief Danso, a cousin of Tafari's mother, stood in the council and declared, "I have the bloodline. I will wear the cloth." But Elder Bomani, who wore a clean white cloth wrapped tightly like a scholar's turban, replied, "Blood alone does not make a king. Tafari ruled with wisdom, not inheritance." Then came Madame Lolo, the market chairwoman who pounded her staff and shouted, "Let the people speak. Let the farmers and weavers choose. Tafari trusted us. We must trust ourselves." Arguments broke out. Factions formed. One side shouted for tradition. The other called for reform. One night, as the moon slept behind dark clouds, the sacred wooden chest that held Tafari's white cloth was found empty, stolen. Word spread like wildfire. Chief Danso appeared at dawn, wearing the cloth wrapped high on his head, tied in the style of kings. He stood before the crowd at the courtyard and declared, "This is a sign. Tafari speaks through me now. I am your king." But not everyone bowed. Young people whispered, "The cloth was not taken in light. He rules from shadow." Elder Bomani refused to enter the palace again. Madame Lolo declared the market closed until the truth returned. The kingdom split into 2 voices, one that feared chaos and one that feared submission. In a distant part of the kingdom, a woman walked barefoot to the capital. She wore no jewelry, only the blue mourning cloth. Her name was Naya, the widow of the village blacksmith and Tafari's mother. She stood before the gathered council and said, "My son never bowed to lies, and I did not raise a king for his cloth to be stolen in the dark." She looked into Chief Danso's eyes and said, "You wear his cloth, but you do not carry his spirit." Danso laughed, "You are just a woman." But the people remembered. She was the one who once took a whipping to defend her son. The ground began to shift. 3 nights later, a fire broke out in the grain storehouses. Some blamed the rebels who opposed Danso, Others said it was divine warning. Danso arrested Elder Bomani and Madame Lolo, claiming they inspired revolt. But then something unexpected happened. The youth, those who had grown under Tafari's teachings, marched in silence to the palace. They carried books, not weapons. They held scrolls and palm leaf notes raised high. One girl shouted, "Tafari never ruled with fear." They stood until dawn. Danso, watching from the balcony, began to tremble. The cloth on his head felt heavier than ever. The next morning, the council gathered again, but Danso did not come. When they entered the royal chamber, they found the white cloth folded neatly on the wooden stool where Tafari once sat. No note, no sound, just silence. He had left. Later, people said he wept. Some said he had truly loved Tafari, but could not live in his shadow. Elder Bomani was released. Madame Lolo returned to the market, and the stool remained empty, but no longer in shame. The people now knew the cloth meant nothing without truth. From that day forward, no one wore Tafari's cloth again. Instead, the people formed the Assembly of Voices, a council of elders, youth, women, and workers, elected by the villages. Each year, one person was chosen to sit on the stool, not as ruler, but as speaker of the people. They read aloud Tafari's writings. They settled disputes with his principals. His school remained open. His tree continued to shade young readers. He had died, but his fire remained. 10 years had passed since the white cloth was folded and placed on Tafari's stool. The assembly of voices ruled wisely, but new generations were rising, children born after Tafari's death. They had heard the stories but never seen the man. A teacher named Aqua, who once learned at Tafari's feet, worried. "What happens when stories fade?" she asked. So she began a new tradition, planting memory trees beside every school. For each tree, a scroll of Tafari's lessons was buried beneath its roots. She called it Planting Tafari. And soon, across the kingdom, baobab saplings grew, each with his words buried below. One day, a stranger came to Kumado. He was dressed in foreign cloth, shiny, unnatural, stiff. His name was Mr. Hadley, a trader from across the ocean. He brought gifts, mirrors, coins, umbrellas, spices, but he also brought contracts. "I've heard of this land ruled by voices," he said with a smile, "but every land needs profit." He met with council members and tried to buy rights to mine salt from sacred ground. Some were tempted, but the youth who had grown in Tafari's schools remembered the rule: never trade your roots for coins. To teach the next generation how to resist temptation, the assembly began a new custom: the market scrolls. Each season, youths wrote letters debating real kingdom issues: land rights, trade, farming, schools. The best letters were read aloud in the market square and debated. A girl named Zelma, only 13, wrote a scroll titled, "We Are Not for Sale." When she read it, the crowd stood in silence. Then someone began to clap. The clap turned into a roar. Even foreign traders lowered their heads. That day, the people said, "Wisdom does not come from age alone." A group of former students came together with a bold idea. "Let us wear the white cloth again, not as rulers, but as workers." They formed a movement called the Carriers of Tafari. Farmers wore it when planting seeds. Teachers wore it when entering classrooms. Healers wrapped it when visiting the sick. Each person tied it differently: on the shoulder, around the neck, across the chest. never as a symbol of power, but of purpose. The cloth had returned, but now it belonged to the people. Not everyone approved. In a village far to the north, a warlord named Gouda, who claimed to be descended from kings, banned the white cloth. "It is weakness disguised as pride," he shouted. He ordered every cloth burned. People resisted. They hid their scrolls and head wraps in cooking pots and floorboards. But one woman, Amma, refused to hide. She stood in the village square wearing her cloth tied across her heart. "You can burn cloth," she said, "but not memory." She was arrested, but her bravery sparked a movement. In a hidden room beneath the old palace, a young boy named Kweku, a curious orphan, found a secret door. Inside, he found a book sealed in red twine. It was Tafari's personal journal. No one had ever seen it. He took it to the council. Inside were entries never known to the public, regrets, questions, fears. Tafari had doubted himself often. One entry read, "They think I am brave, but some nights I want to run away. I stay because they need someone to stay." The kingdom wept. Even the strong need strength. Out of the mountain villages where Amma once stood, rose a woman named Sana, a daughter of farmers, educated by torchlight under the great baobab. She wore no shoes when she came to the capital, but she carried the voices of 12 villages in her notebook. She stood before the assembly of voices and said, "I do not come to rule, I come to organize." She became the first servant queen, a leader with no palace, no throne, only a seat at every table where people gathered to decide. She visited farms, schools, markets, and courts, never wearing a crown, only a faded white cloth tied simply over her shoulder. Sanaa began a project Tafari had dreamed of, but never finished: the Book of the People's History. Across the land, scribes walked from village to village, collecting stories from elders, teachers, warriors, midwives, and children. They didn't write about kings. They wrote about the weavers who fed the army, the mothers who taught math while cooking, the boys who repaired water pots, the girls who healed goats. And in each story, a name echoed quietly: Tafari. He was no longer a man. He had become a seed planted in every home. One year, on the Day of Memory, a crowd gathered beneath the great baobab where Tafari once died. There was no ceremony, no speeches, only silence. Then the oldest living teacher, Elder Kunto, stepped forward and pressed his hand on the bark. He whispered, "You taught us not to bow, so we stand." Children began reciting Tafari's proverbs from memory. Their voices mixed with the wind, rising softly, then loudly, like song. A true leader eats last. Power that silences others is weakness. If you must rise, rise with many. That day they said, "The tree has spoken." When Sana grew old, she called the council to her hut. She held in her hands a white cloth, not Tafari's, but her own, woven with threads from villages all across Kumado. She said, "I have served. I will not pass on power, only the invitation to serve." She handed the cloth to a young blind girl named Lena, who had memorized the entire Book of the People. "You do not need eyes to see justice," Sana said. "You only need courage." And so the white cloth passed again, not to the strongest, not to the loudest, but to the bravest of heart. Generations passed, the world changed, but in every school, every market, every debate hall, and harvest festival across Kumado, there remained a stool beneath a tree, never sat upon, only watched, only respected. Children sat beneath it and asked, "Who was Tafari?" And the answer was never the same. Some said he was a king. Others said he was a teacher. But most said he was the boy who refused to bow, so we never had to again. His story ended, but his spirit stood forever.